Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are talking about the methods used to establish authoritarian states, use of force. Now, just as a refresher, methods is an action committed either by a person or persons as a way of accomplishing a goal. Use of force is the means of making someone comply or to overcome resistance to what you want to have in order to protect life, property, or to take a person into custody. So for this one, we're going to see a lot of very stark connections with Hitler and what he did, because if we remember, he led his revolution and used a group of members, the SA, to attack people and to force them to work. Mao is going to do something very similar but from a different direction. So what we are talking about today for Mao is the Futon Incident and the Rectification of Conduct campaign. These two events are pretty distantly separated from each other in terms of how quickly Hitler came to power versus Mao, yet have very stark implications for what and how much power Mao has even before he controls the country. All of this is just towards his own people. So, the first one is the Futon Incident. This takes place in 1930 during the first part of the Chinese Civil War. It is in this area, in Futon, which is a city, that Mao starts to suspect that there are people who are gaining more and more power to stand against him. And he starts getting more and more suspicious. And what he is scared of the most is spies from the Nationalist Party or 28 Bolsheviks who are trying to corrupt Mao's supporters. So this is before the Long March. This is before he gets to his legendary status that he does this. So even before he had major control over his own people, the people who were following him, the people who were understanding him, became a target. He was very scared that people were going to try to overthrow him, try to undermine him, try to destroy everything he worked for. And so he orders essentially an attack on his men by his men, looking for any spies and any Bolshevik supporters. He brings in other soldiers who comes in and starts essentially assaulting, destroying, beating, and killing anyone they suspect or anyone Mao suspected to be as a threat to him and his power. This ultimately resulted in 3,000 people being killed. So, before power, in the middle of fighting the nationalists, in the middle of the Chinese Civil War, Mao takes time to turn on his own people and kill 3,000 of them. So much so that he even actually specifically told the guys that he hired to attack his own people that anybody who's in the leadership position, make sure to torture them, make sure to make it as long as possible so that they can give us names and that we can really find out just how far this network is. And it provides a very interesting dynamic because now no one is safe from the true growth of Mao coming to power, the beginning part of it, in his own party. He doesn't control any part of China. Before he gets to that point, he is still so afraid, and he starts to implement what is called a carrot and stick method. Now remember, one of Mao's most famous quotes was that power comes through the barrel of a gun. So he was always going to resort to violence, one way or another. He said that in 1927, 3 years prior to the Futon Incident. So which is why the carrot and the stick method fits Mao so well. And so essentially, what this is saying is, I'm going to provide you with all these wonderful things. Home, food, security, food. I said that twice. And you can take it, or you can be beaten with the stick. So either you enjoy the things I'm giving you, or I beat you with a stick. Right? I hurt you, and I use violence to get you to do what I want you to do. The Futon Incident showed the rest of the Chinese Communist Party, and the 28 Bolsheviks for that matter, just how far Mao was willing to take that stick. Just how far he was willing to hurt those who stand in his way. Now, this does provide an interesting juxtaposition. This provides an interesting comparison of like, well, hold on. If Mao is like this in 1930, when the Long March was happening, and when Mao saved all of those people, how much did everyone who gave Mao power was doing it because they trust him, or were doing it because of things like this? Because remember, this happens 5 years before the Long March. So we see a lot of interesting dynamics where Mao's carrot and stick policy that we see like with the peasant policy, but his violence is always present, is always around. And it's where we have to really critically analyze just how far he was willing to use force, how far he was willing to use coercion to get his means, if persuasion or the carrot or his propaganda didn't work. And that's what we're going to see in the next example with the rectification of conduct campaigns. Now, the rectification of conduct campaigns happens at a very weird time. What this means, and I'm just going to translate or break down what the name is before I even dig into it. So, rectification of conduct. Rectification means to correct, to rectify is the root word there, to fix or to change, which is, they're all the same types of words, something. So usually you can rectify a mistake. You can rectify your behavior. You can rectify your conversation. You can change and fix things that have had a negative impact. So in this case, it's focusing on conduct. Thus, it is to fix or to change the way you hold yourself, the way you do things, the way you say things, the way you behave. So the rectification of conduct is fix your behavior, fix your mentality, fix your approach, fix your understandings, your mindset. And the reason why this comes at a really strange time is because it happens in the middle of World War II. In the middle of China and the CCP joining forces with the nationalists and fighting against the Japanese and the Germans and the Italians in some places, they are conducting this campaign. Now, this campaign is horrific, because it's violence that isn't always explicit. What Mao was asking people to do was to publicly shame themselves and to have self-criticism. Because a core part of Maoism, as we will hear in our next lecture, is if you don't criticize, if you think you are free from criticism, then you are at fault. There's an issue with you and your mindset. So he specifically asks people to come out and share their flaws. But if you notice, I've yet to say that Mao has done that. He doesn't do it. He makes others. He'll say one or two things about himself about like, oh, well, my rectification of conduct is that I eat too much. And then he'll look over and see somebody and expect them to say, oh, my rectification of conduct is that I haven't worked hard enough for the peasants. Right? Because in Mao's mind, things are about him. So, what else is he expecting in this rectification? Well, it's these right here. By using self-force, by using self-criticism of people, he's able to get rid of every form of opposition. The 28 Bolsheviks, they're gone. They have disappeared. either through violence or through assimilation or fear. They run away. And so because of that, this is where you get that second bullet point. He finally triumphed over the pro-Moscow wing of the party. And this is where we get to the third bullet point, where he moves to cult status in Yan'an, where the Long March, the Futon Incident, the hospital, the persuasion, the coercion, everything that he has done has made him look and be near perfect. Right? The people would never say he was perfect because that would get you into trouble, because you need to publicly shame. That would be an issue of your mindset to think he is perfect. But it's not saying that you can't praise him and elevate him on a higher status. And this is where we get to the next bullet point, where his ideology just severely swoops in and replaces all form of communism. So that it's no longer communism, it's Maoism. He is then formally given dominance over the party, despite the fact that since 1935 at Yan'an, Mao has been given essentially all the power to his party, the CCP. In 1943, he is given full power. And then, when World War II comes to the end, this cult status that has already put Mao so high on a pedestal goes to the highest it possibly can. And now the CCP see Mao as not only a hero of the people, but he is now a hero of China. He is now a hero over the Japanese. And thus, this violence, this force that he pushes people to go through, breaks their mind and forces them, and in some cases actually results in physical beatings and executions, to achieve all of this. His force helps him get all of this, compounded with the peasant policy, compounded with everything we've heard about in previous lectures.